Minecraft is a gaming sensation, but what do you actually know about the guy that created it? Maybe you know his name, Markus Persson, although most people just call him Notch. Maybe you know his place of origin, Sweden. But what do you really know about his fall from grace? Over the last couple of years, he's gone from being one of the most successful people in history to, well, the world's saddest billionaire. Naturally, that raises a lot of questions. What exactly happened? What changed? How did he go from being one of the most successful people in history to a bitter old guy on the internet who yells about stuff all the time? On June 16th, 2014, Notch sent shockwaves across the internet when he made this tweet saying, "Anyone want to buy my share of Mojang so I can move on with my life? Getting hate for trying to do the right thing is not my gig." He later clarified in an interview with Forbes that the tweet had mostly just been a joke and a way for him to let out some of his frustration, saying,
"Everyone's giving me so much crap online." I just went, no, this is not worth it anymore.
Right.
So I just tweeted kind of jokingly, who wants to buy the company?
But joke or not, it still left a lot of people in shock. The owner of Minecraft trying to sell Minecraft? Why would he do such a thing? In order to fully understand why, we need to throw it back a little bit. Notch was incredibly well known in certain circles, and he was undoubtedly the face of Minecraft. He had a level of fame and public recognition that we rarely see in the gaming industry. Unless your name is Todd Howard, in which case, we all know what you've done. Oh, you know what? Shigeru Miyamoto, he's pretty famous too. What was I saying? Yes! Since the game's official launch in 2011, that level of notoriety had become something of a double-edged sword for Notch, though. While he was still the face of the game, he hadn't actually worked on it in a long time. In 2011, he handed the position of lead designer over to a man called Jens Bergensten, before going on to sign over full creative control in 2014. But that didn't really matter to the general audience. He was the face that they recognized and the person that they associated with the game. So he was the person they went after whenever they were unhappy about something. And oh boy, were they unhappy. All the time. But hey, welcome to the internet. But the amount of pressure that Notch must have been dealing with at the time just sounds absolutely insane. Just imagine for a second, you dedicate your entire life to creating this thing and it becomes way more successful than you ever bargained for. So you hand the reins over to somebody else. And then the tide starts turning and you suddenly have millions of people around the world constantly attacking you on social media for things that aren't your responsibility anymore. I mean, just take a look at this. It's obvious that he was starting to become super uncomfortable with all of the attention that he was getting. And so he started looking for a way out. He said a number of times over the years that all he really wanted to do was to go back making fun little prototypes. He'd always been the kind of kid to hide out in his mom's basement and code all day. All he really wanted to do was go back to that kind of environment and do what made him truly happy. Which brings us all the way back around to Notch's initial tweet. He says that it was mostly a joke, but within 24 hours of him posting it, Microsoft had already made him an offer of $2.5 billion. Even he admits that it didn't take him very long to accept the offer, although he does insist that it's not about the money, it's about my sanity. I'm sure I'm not the only one giving him the biggest side eye on that one. Sure, Jan, it had nothing to do with you being greedy AF. By the time that he and Mojang officially parted ways in the summer of 2014, Notch was walking away with $1.3 billion. And that's not even counting the millions of dollars, at least, that he had already made through Minecraft in the years leading up to it. There are theories that Notch was already a millionaire way before Minecraft's first official birthday. Just to put how important this deal was in perspective for you, Notch now had so much money that he had managed to earn himself a spot on the list of the 20 richest people alive. And like most people who suddenly have a lot more money than they know what to do with, Notch went a little crazy with it. The first thing he did with all that money? Break an LA property price record by spending $70 million on a mansion out in Beverly Hills. Obviously, that's what you do. Not only that, but he immediately started hanging out with a bunch of super famous people like Selena Gomez and DJ Zed, and I can't be the only person that finds that kind of creepy, right? I mean, this guy's almost 40 years old and mostly hanging out with people at least 10 years younger than he was. I'm not trying to say that 40-year-olds are old, by the way. I'm just saying that what do rich 40-year-olds even have in common with rich 20-somethings? The fat sacks of cash they have sitting at home? The cars they drive? Tips on how to dodge their taxes most effectively? Whatever the reason, people carried on hanging out with him, and parties at his place quickly became the norm. And it didn't take him very long to become known as the party guy. I mean, according to Ethan Klein,
He's known. I mean, people know him in LA in the partying scene as the crazy Beverly Hills party guy.
For a little while, things seemed to be better than ever for Notch. He was in a brand new city, living in a neighborhood that most people can only dream of. He was surrounded by a ton of famous people that actually seemed to like hanging out with him. And he had an insane amount of money in his bank account that meant he'd never have to do another day's work in his life. If he really wanted to, he could have paid someone to fan him with the palm leaf all day and constantly feed him grapes. But in August 2015, just over a year after he sold the company and moved out to LA, Notch would make a series of tweets that seemed to suggest that things weren't really okay at all. The first of his tweets, made on the 29th, read, "Hanging out in Ibiza with a bunch of friends and partying with famous people, able to do whatever I want, and I've never felt more isolated." He would then go on to make a number of other tweets in that same vein, saying things like, "The problem with getting everything is you run out of reasons to keep trying, and human interaction becomes impossible due to imbalance. And in Sweden, I will sit around and wait for my friends with jobs and families to have time to do stuff, watching my reflection in the monitor." Not only was Notch feeling stressed because of how isolated he was, all of this was also happening around the anniversary of his divorce. They'd been married for less than a year before Notch's changing lifestyle had started making his wife super uncomfortable, and they filed for divorce in August 2012. They seemed to be playing on his mind a lot around that time, as he also tweeted out, "Found a great girl, but she's afraid of me and my lifestyle, and went with a normal person instead." Notch running away at the first sign of trouble instead of working through his problems? Well, that doesn't sound like him at all. But fan response to this was overwhelmingly positive, with most people agreeing that he just needed to find something to occupy his time. Some suggested volunteer or charity work, while others said he just needed to get a job so that he had something to take his mind off of things. While opinions differed on how he got himself out of this funk, the general feeling seemed to be one of support and acceptance. The same cannot be said for what was about to happen next. Buckle your seatbelts, folks. Fast forward to 2017. At this point in time, it had been long enough that most people had forgotten all about Notch. His distance from Minecraft meant that for a lot of people, he'd just become another rich guy partying out in LA, until people started noticing a fairly troubling pattern in Notch's most recent tweets. They were starting to get pretty political in nature, and not the fun kind of politics where you dunk on politicians for being idiots and lying all the time, you know, that stuff. No! Notch was beginning to amp up his pretty conservative viewpoints, and was becoming a lot more vocal about the things he disagreed with. And boy, did he make some extremely controversial and hurtful statements about some very sensitive topics, including, but not limited to, feminism, LGBTQ+ pride, trans people, and racial equality. You know, all the things that he as a straight, white, cisgendered man is fully entitled to talk about, despite never actually having experienced any of the other problems that these people face every single day of their lives. On June 13th, 2017, Notch tweeted out, "Most people who proclaim to be feminists online these days are overtly sexist against men." I thought you were supposed to be smart, Notch. Sexism against men doesn't exist, dummy. The word you're actually looking for is misandry. And women saying a couple of mean things about men on the internet isn't even close to being the same thing that most women deal with every single day. That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. A couple of weeks later, he made things even worse by saying, "If you're against the concept of heterosexual Pride Day, you're a complete effing C word, and you deserve to be shot." Really? Saying that a whole community of people that are already killed in a lot of places just because of their sexuality or gender identity deserve to die? That's insanely gross, Notch. Unfortunately, Notch's hate-fueled tirades against minority groups didn't stop in 2017 and would continue over the next couple of years. It all came to a head in 2019 when he went one step too far and posted a tweet saying that trans women aren't women. In a follow-up tweet, he doubled down on his opinion, saying that you are absolutely evil if you want to encourage delusion. What happened to not stigmatizing mental illness? Being a trans person doesn't mean that you're mentally ill. Being a trans person can lead to mental illness because of the way our society treats people for being trans. There's a huge difference. I just want to make that clear. Trans women are women, and trans men are men. End of discussion. Refusing to listen to actual scientists who know better than you doesn't make you smart, Notch. It just makes you an asshole. But it was at this point that Microsoft finally decided to step in and start the process of removing Notch's presence from the game. Up until this point, they had left his name on the title screen as a shout out to the man who created the game in the first place. But in March of 2019, they finally removed his logo from the title screen altogether. Now, there are a lot of reasons for this. At this point, they'd owned Minecraft for a longer period of time than Notch had, and it wasn't really his game anymore. Notch had spent a lot of his time making fun of the game on Twitter and just bad-mouthing the work they'd done since he left. But it's generally agreed that the biggest reason was this series of tweets. There's nothing big corporations hate more than controversy that can tarnish their reputation. A spokesperson told Variety that, quote, his comments and opinions do not reflect those of Microsoft or Mojang and are not representative of Minecraft, end quote. Notch has ruined his own image in the eyes of pretty much everyone on the internet over the last couple of years by refusing to listen or apologize when he's messed up. But I think there's something even sadder at play here. He distanced himself from Minecraft and Mojang almost 10 years ago. He made that choice on his own. No one forced him to do it. And yet, he can't seem to move on from either of them. He is constantly making rude comments about the game on Twitter and replies to a lot of their tweets by making fun of them for trying something new. It seems like all of that success has just made him feel like he's untouchable. He can say whatever he wants and get away with it because there isn't anyone on equal footing to call him out on it. He's managed to turn that whole power imbalance thing around and use it to his own advantage. I think we can all agree with this Twitter user who says, I've said it before, Marcus, your problem is that you became successful. But what do you guys think? Do you think he deserved to be removed from the game? Has he said anything else controversial recently that we need to talk about? Let us know in the comments below.